Straighten your tie. Shine your shoes. Company's coming. 3 little maids from the toughest school in the jungle. The field marshal, who took command of the Liberation Army to save her men.
I'm in this for only one reason. Because he is.
The general, top mama of a female commando unit.
Now listen, pretty Cohen. Listen very well. The revolution needs Ernesto. It needs you and me and everyone who believes in it.
The colonel, lean, mean, and foxy, with plenty of ammunition stacked in just the right places. Savage Sisters.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And today we're talking about Savage Sisters from 1974.
Savage Sisters was directed by Eddie Romero, written by H. Franco Moon and Harry Corner, and was produced by John Ashley, Eddie Romero, and David Cohen for Cinema Projects International, Hemisphere Pictures, and AIP.
Savage Sisters stars Gloria Hendry as Lynn Jackson, Cheri Caffaro as Joe Turner, Rosanna Ortiz as Mei Ling, John Ashley as W.P. Billingsley, Sid Haig as Malavasi, Eddie Garcia as Captain Morales, Vic Díaz as One Eye, Rita Gomez as Matron Ortega, Leopoldo Salcedo as General Balthazar.
Also appearing are Dindo Fernando as Ernesto, Angelo Ventura as Punjab, Alfonso Carvajal as Ruiz, Subas Herrero as Victor, Max Rojo as Hawk, and Johnny Long as Jackal.
There's no cold open here. We just see palm trees with credits going over them. There's a road leading through a lot of trees and brush, and a truck drives down that road. In the back of the truck, there are several women.
And we get various shots of this until the credits end, and we find ourselves at a house of some sort, which is not the destination of said truck.
No, we're cutting to an up-pants shot of producer John Ashley. He's lying on a Persian rug, wearing tighter than tight jeans, in a loud polyester shirt open to the waist, and he's rocking a porn stash.
He's also surrounded by
3 harem girls.
He's also surrounded by harem girls of various sizes and shapes.
And attractiveness. They're fawning over him while he introduces himself as W.P. Billingsley. And he says there are 3 things that get most people excited: sex, politics, and money. And he starts fingering some money. It looks like it's maybe $50 in ones.
He's going to tell us about the time that a briefcase with $1 million ended up on this island. General Balthazar was determined to get possession, but Malavasi, one of the meanest cutthroats who ever lived, had designs on it too.
While he's telling the story, we see the players in action. We see General Balthazar being helped by the toadying Captain Morales, and they pose for a photo to be taken by the omnipresent photographer Ruiz. Then we cut to another part of the island, and we see the antagonist, Malavasi, played with mucho gusto by Sid Haig, in the back of a truck. And then we cut to Joe Turner and her love, Ernesto Gutierrez. They're strolling arm in arm through a field. Billingsley's voiceover tells us that Joe's bag is love and Ernesto's is revolution. He's the leader of said revolution. She's helping. She's going to team up with other women to help blow up a bridge, which is part of the master plan.
Joe's team blowing up the bridge is supposed to be Ernesto's signal to grab the $1 million, which would be enough loot to hire every bandito in the country.
So the action proper begins, and on the truck with Joe and the other women, there's someone who's not on board with the plan. This is Rocco. He's helping Malavasi, and he's informing Malavasi of their every move. And he's going to make sure those women never reach the bridge.
Rocco's in the passenger seat of the truck, and he smiles at the girls in the back, and Joe flips him off.
No one on this truck is wearing a bra, men or women.
The truck arrives at its destination, and the girls are ordered to get out of the truck.
The man in charge of the compound where they parked asks where the regular driver is, and Rocco says that he's sick. So he's delivering 16 fruit pickers, take him or leave him. And his reward is 1,000 pesos.
Joe and Mei Ling, who we haven't been formally introduced to yet, but she was also on the back of the truck, split off from the group and go inside a building.
They meet with other women there and they head down to a basement area. There's a pile of straw, and as the women dig through the straw, they find guns and other types of weapons. And everyone arms themselves.
Joe explains that a minute ago at 10 o'clock, wait, hopefully it'll be over at 10:05, it's live.
Well, that's what I have. I have a minute ago, they hit a government convoy at 10 a.m. If all goes right, it'll all be over by 10:05. And yeah, that's...
I just wrote the quote, though, and so it doesn't make sense.
I know it doesn't make sense with the plot. I think what we figured out is that a minute ago, the government convoy took off. They're headed toward the bridge. We're headed toward the bridge. If all goes right, it'll be over in 5 minutes. So let's just go with that and not whatever she said. Might be a little bad writing here.
Elsewhere, Malavasi and his henchman, One Eye, are hanging out with Ernesto and Raul. Ernesto has hired Malavasi and his gang to help with his job.
Ernesto tells Malavasi that his men shouldn't move till they hear the bridge blow, and the women are supposed to blow the bridge. Malavasi agrees with this, but then makes a crude joke about girls only being good for blowing one thing. Stay classy, movie.
Then Malavasi heads out with One Eye. When they're out of earshot of Ernesto and Raul, One Eye whistles, and the rest of the gang joins them.
There's a large group of men that Ernesto had no idea were on Malavasi's side. Alone, Raul and Ernesto wonder if they can trust Malavasi. Ernesto says they need the firepower. Without Malavasi, they couldn't touch a single centavo of the $1 million. And Raul wonders if they can cross Malavasi and company later to get him to settle for just a third of the money, instead of half.
If it were up to Raul, he'd just kill them all right after the raid. But Ernesto says he and Raul aren't bandits, so they'll try and play fair.
Big mistake. So the general's convoy is starting through the jungle. Joe and the women are donning camo gear. Mei Ling tells the women that the general will be looking for an ambush, and that's where they come in. Joe says that just before the attack, we separate that support from the rest of the convoy. And then Mei Ling says by blowing up the bridge, and reaches into a sack. She pulls out a bundle of dynamite, and Joe says they blow the bridge and then they split. Remember, no one's programmed to be a hero today, so take no chances. There's $1 million in cash writing on it. Suddenly, there's a crash and a shot. Johnny, the warehouse guy, staggers towards the balcony overlooking the downstairs pit where the girls are. He has a patch of red on his shirt, and Joe screams, "Johnny," and then he's shot again.
But suddenly, a bunch of military comes in, and they start shooting. Yep. Several women go down.
Don't ask questions, just shoot.
Captain Morales enters. These men are under his command, and he orders them to stop shooting.
He goes downstairs to talk to Joe, Mei Ling, and the other surviving women. He asks Ruiz if there are any other men in the building, and Ruiz says no, off camera. He approaches the women, Ruiz behind him, shooting low-angle pictures. When no one responds to his questions, he snarls about them dispensing with these social amenities, and then says he already knows all about them.
And he says that should be obvious since he's in the process of thwarting said plan. And this whole time, Ruiz is busy snapping pictures. He recognizes Joe. Her father was renowned in the U.S. Navy, and he's aware that she's the woman of Ernesto Gutierrez, revolutionary leader.
And he kind of clucks his tongue that she went from being on the social register to being on his country's list of subversives. And then Ruiz gets a great shot of her. Then Morales goes to Mei Ling and says that she's hopefully the last in a long line of political fanatics. But then he goes on to say that his superiors and himself respected her family. And then he asks, "Where are your men?"
Joe replies, "No comment, pork chop."
He taunts them. He also asks them, "How do you think the army found them there? An accident?" "No, one of your fellow liberators phoned in a tip."
So now the 4 prisoners are taken outside to be questioned and executed. Captain Morales asks them once again, where are their men? And the women are silent. And the first is brought out, and she is shot. As she is shot, she throws up her arms and falls to the ground.
I don't know what I'd do if I were shot. Then the second woman is brought out, asks the same question. She also doesn't reply, and she gets the same treatment, death by firing squad.
With the same reaction, arms fly up, and she falls to the ground.
Maybe that's what happens, Jeff. We don't know.
Now only Joe and Mei Ling are left. Morales asks again, and Joe tells him to stick it up his ass.
So Mei Ling and Joe are put before the firing squad in front of the bodies of their compatriots. And they don't say anything. Morales calls for the men to ready their guns. Then he tells his men that there's more than one way to skin a pussy. Gag.
I think we're finally going to get our rating on this episode.
Could have been talking about cats.
Yeah, but I said ass.
I'll probably say the B word a few times too. Then Morales orders the men to load them into the Jeep, but it only takes them as far as the holding cell.
Once Joe and Mei Ling are alone, Joe is trying to figure out who might have betrayed them, because who knew that they were using that warehouse? Ernesto and his men, Malavasi and his men. But Joe doesn't think it adds up, because if she and Mei Ling are unable to blow up the bridge, there will be no signal and therefore no money. But Mei Ling reminds her that she and Joe knew of the plan, so it could have been one of them.
Then Joe says sarcastically that Mei Ling will know that's true when they kill Mei Ling and let Joe live. And she wonders where Ernesto is. Mei Ling says on the run, a prisoner like us or dead. Telegram girl. But Joe doesn't want to hear this.
Mei Ling says it all doesn't really matter. If anything were to happen to her, to Joe, to Ernesto, the revolution will still continue. But Joe doesn't care. The only reason she's involved with the revolution is because of Ernesto. She's there for him, not the revolution.
I notice that she, Mei Ling, and Joe are wearing quite a lot of cosmetics for serious revolutionaries. But now we're back at the bridge where everyone's in place. Except the women, of course.
The convoy with the money is traveling toward its destination. We see two men in suits and wearing big rings, both handcuffed to a briefcase, and they're looking around nervously.
One of the soldiers tells the nervous passengers that they shouldn't worry. This route has been scouted out, so there's no chance of an ambush. But the men don't seem very confident of that.
And they shouldn't, because Malavasi's banditos are waiting to ambush the convoy. We see that they have already taken some of these military guys and have them at gunpoint.
So we see soldiers lining the bridge as the four-vehicle convoy passes over it, though we don't see the soldiers in the establishing shot of the bridge. But anyway, all four vehicles cross, and then Rocco pushes the plunger that blows it up.
Now the convoy is under attack. Malavasi's banditos and Ernesto and his men are shooting. The two men with the briefcases take off. A soldier is covering them. He shoots at Ernesto, who is chasing the briefcase. Ernesto shoots the soldier. One of the banditos runs ahead of Ernesto and shoots one of the men with the briefcase. But unfortunately for this bandito, he shot the man without a gun.
The other man turns around and starts firing at the revolutionary who shot his compatriot. And now One Eye heaves into view, watching as the money man fires repeatedly at the revolutionary. One Eye dances around, kind of whining a little. And then he pulls a knife and prances behind the money man, stabbing him. He's done shooting after that.
Back up the road, the last of the military man stands up in his jeep, holding his gun above his head, a white flag attached. But he is quickly executed.
Back at the briefcase, One Eye tells Malavasi that the money men still won't let go of the money because they're handcuffed to it. So Malavasi gives him the obvious answer.
Remove their stinking hands.
A man with a machete frees the dead men of their burden by hacking off their hands. And then Ernesto appears. He's looking at the case with the bloody handcuffs dangling from the handle.
Malavasi shoots the lock off the briefcase and opens it to reveal the prize, $1 million in U.S. currency. Maybe. There's about $120,000 visible, and the briefcase doesn't look big enough to hold the full $1 million, but we'll just have to go with it for the sake of the story.
Everyone cheers. Ernesto says this is where we make the split. Malavasi walks away, turns, and says, I guess this is where we blow your stinking heads off. And then he turns and fires, and his men do the same, mowing down all of Ernesto's men, including Ernesto. Sorry, Joe.
The banditos start looting the bodies, but Malavasi calls them nincompoops, saying that from now on they travel in style. They have $1 million in U.S. currency, and there's no need to loot corpses.
Then he orders them to get those stinking bodies out of here.
Yep, they have a schedule to keep.
There's a truck approaching, and the bandito who was shot by the money men asks for a light. And Malavasi says yes, and then just shoots him, much to the horror of the others. And then Malavasi screams, never take your wounded with you. They only slow you down.
One Eye bends down and takes a cigarette from the man's mouth. As he walks past Malavasi, Malavasi points his revolver at him, but One Eye says, I've got matches. Malavasi rolls his eyes.
The truck driver tells Malavasi that they need to get moving. The troops are right behind them. Malavasi asks about those bitches, and the driver draws his finger across his throat. Malavasi laughs at this good news, and then he screams, Vamonos.
Now we're finally meeting Lynn Jackson. She's the last of the Savage sisters in this movie. She's interrogating a man accused of raping 6 girls, not one of them over 15 years old.
And her method of interrogation is to tie a rope around his genitals and yank on it.
But he's pleading not guilty by reason of homosexuality.
She's not buying it, though. But then another guard comes in and says that Matron Ortega wants to see her. She tells the man to sign the confession or else, and then he asks for a lawyer. At that, she ties the rope to a door handle and slams the door on her way out. And we hear him scream.
Lynn enters Matron Ortega's office, and she's there with Captain Morales and Ruiz, the captain's personal photographer.
The matron says she hopes she didn't interrupt anything important, but Sergeant Jackson quips that she thinks that it came off all right.
The matron introduces Lynn to the captain, who is pleased to make her acquaintance. Captain Morales says that since Lynn has a reputation as an interrogator, there are 2 women from whom he needs to extract information. He wants to know where their male counterparts are.
Immediately, says Matron Ortega. Jackson says that she's always tortured or interrogated male suspects, and for criminal cases. Morales reminds her that insurrection is also a crime. So Jackson promises to do what she can, and she leaves.
Then Captain Morales asks Ruiz to leave the room because there's an important matter of which he has to speak to the matron in private.
Yeah, she gave him a look. After they close the door, Ortega starts kissing Morales aggressively.
The captain begins role-playing his new position. Will he be a major? No, colonel. But Ortega tells him he's thinking too grandly, and his position shall be that of a dog.
She's holding a cat o' nine tails, and she asks Morales if he thinks he's worthy of such a important position.
She calls him a coward, and he tells her to stop it, but she insists that he's a coward and a dog.
He claims to be a man. She whips him. He cowers and sneers, "I'm a man," but after a bit more whipping, he puts his paws up in surrender, admitting that he is in fact a whipped dog.
Satisfied with his answer, Matron Ortega throws away the whip and sits down across the room.
Then she puts her knee up provocatively and says, "Then lick me."
Outside, we see that Joe and Mei Ling are being led across the camp. They're being led to a room where Lynn is waiting to interrogate them. As they near, they fight back. They take down a couple of the guards when Lynn stops the brawl, and she tells Joe and Mei Ling to step inside.
Lynn tells Joe that she knows her little Girl Scout friend. They used to work together. Mei Ling admits that they were whores in the same house. And Joe tells Lynn that she's downgraded from whore to pig.
And Lynn says she's been a lot of things. So everything Lynn does, she does it the best she can, whether it be whoring or torturing.
And she says the two of them are going to get their asses kicked now and then shot in the morning. How does that make them feel? And Joe says it makes her feel a little easier in the mind. And Lynn says they're so wrong. She tells them that one way or another, they're going to talk. So why not do it with the least hassle and the least pain?
Mei Ling says that her people know they've been captured, so they would have moved on, and there's really nothing for them to tell.
Jackson says, yeah, that makes sense, but it doesn't matter. She doesn't get paid to use her judgment. She just needs to get Joe and Mei Ling to say what they want to hear.
Lynn says she can go through the usual routine, a little pain, a jolt of electricity, removal of fingernails, but she doesn't think that this will work on the two of them.
Yep, she's going straight to the advanced stuff, though it brings her no pleasure. She orders the soldiers to put Joe on the table. She struggles, but they strap her down and pull down her pants and her panties.
Mei Ling asks Lynn not to do this, but she says the matter is out of her hands and tells the guards to do their thing.
Lynn gives Joe one last chance to confess. Joe tells her to go fuck herself. Lynn tells the soldiers to have at it. The soldier holding the drill with the violator attached to the end of it stands at the foot of her table, extending the device towards her crotch.
Suddenly a siren sounds. Lynn says not to do anything until she returns, and she rushes out.
In Matron Ortega's office, she and Morales are all sweaty and naked, but she starts scrambling to get dressed when they hear the sound. Morales doesn't know what the siren means, and Ortega says it's a general alert. But Morales interprets this as an escape.
Looking out the window, they see that a bunch of jeeps and trucks carrying General Balthazar have arrived.
Yeah, it turns out a general alert is to alert everyone that the general is there. Ortega's angry and Morales is surprised.
Captain Morales automatically stands at attention, but realizes he hasn't zipped his pants yet, nor has he put on his shirt.
Outside, we see there's a truck full of bodies with the general's convoy, and his men start unloading them at the camp. One of them is Ernesto. General Balthazar says, once an irritating political problem, now like so many dead flies.
As Ruiz is taking pictures, Captain Morales comes up and he says, the revolution has been, how do you say, snuffed. And Balthazar says, yes, a victory for our army and for our PR.
Morales doesn't know what PR means. Ortega chimes in it's public relations, but Balthazar says no, press relations.
Here's Balthazar's vision. The last of the subversives, Joe and Mei Ling, are prisoners at the camp. Now a picture of a sunrise execution set against the backdrop of these corpses burning. The press will eat this up.
Morales loves this because his name will travel the globe with this news. Balthazar commands Matron Ortega to schedule a press conference to present the captives to the media covering the war. He then commands Morales to trail after him. As Balthazar gets back into his car, he tells Morales something he'd rather keep from the press. Malavasi and his men escaped, and not only that, they did it with $1 million in U.S. currency.
Balthazar tells Morales that if he can capture Malavasi and recover that money, Morales can be promoted to general.
He'll skip over major and colonel. Morales says that he's not worthy, but Balthazar says that that's neither here nor there. If he is successful, he can have a star of his own. Morales turns to go, but he sees Ruiz and asks for a photo op. Balthazar says yes and gets an uncomfortable hug as his reward.
So Ruiz snaps an awkwardly posed picture of the two of them. Now Joe and Mei Ling are led out to see the bodies of the revolutionaries, and Joe recognizes Ernesto and flashes back to the time they spent walking and talking in a field.
She's pretty shocked, and Lynn glibly remarks that it must have been a tough game.
The general is proclaiming his victory as the prisoners Joe and Mei Ling are led in.
He's telling the press corps all about the street foreplay and freedom thrust. Now all the reporters are peppering Joe with questions at the same time, but she says nothing, and we cut abruptly to a shower scene. but it's more sad than sexy.
Joe and Maylene are brought in to shower, and it's there that Joe finally breaks down. She goes down to her knees, and Maylene tries to comfort her. A guard reaches for Joe, and Maylene pushes her away, saying leave her alone.
There's a brief scuffle until Lynn bops Joe on the head, thus ending the scene.
Now in their cell, Maylene realizes that Malavasi must have been the one who double-crossed them. This is not comforting to Joe because she was the one who suggested to Ernesto to use Malavasi in the first place, and now Ernesto is dead.
Maylene doesn't want to dwell on that now. They need to hurry up and escape. Maylene wants to get back to revolting, but Joe is done with all that. However, she is going to kill Malavasi if it's the last thing she does.
Now we catch up with Malavasi and his men. They are traveling by meat locker.
Meat truck. Meat lockers are usually stationary.
They arrive at an airfield where WP Billingsley is waiting with a few other men, including a Japanese pilot. We know he's Japanese by his music cue.
It's very stereotypical and really unnecessary. And WP has an assistant. He's called Punjab, and he's also a stereotypical Indian-dressed guy. He groans, but he never talks.
Oh, I think he's mute.
He may have lost his tongue. WP Billingsley is crowing that he got them a pilot as he promised, and he's a good one. And then the pilot also groans.
He's introducing, greets them with a hubba hubba.
I think he's drunk.
Yeah, he introduces him and he goes, hubba hubba. That's how he says hello.
Malavasi eyes the plane, and he's not happy with what he sees. He asks if that turkey can fly, and WP squeaks, like an eagle, baby. Like a bald-ass screaming eagle.
The pilot reminds them that his fee is $5,000.
This doesn't make Malavasi any happier, especially after WP says he also needs $1,000 for him and his staff.
Malavasi opens the briefcase and Billingsley says, greenback salad, my favorite dish.
But before any money can change hands, the pilot starts shooting.
Yeah, I don't know if he's celebrating in his drunken state or if he decides he wants it all for himself.
He shoots into the air.
But it doesn't matter. Someone yells, watch out, and a shootout ensues.
So in addition to thinning out the cast, the gunplay wrecks the airplane as important pieces of it fall to the ground.
When things finally calm down, only Malavasi, a few of his men, including One Eye, and Billingsley and Punjab, remain standing.
Malavasi turns on Billingsley, calling him a double-crossing coward. Billingsley protests. He and Punjab almost got shot too, and they've been friends for years. Why would he want to rip off Malavasi? Malavasi yells, $1 million US. But WP weasels that he didn't know that's what Malavasi was taking off the island. He got him a pilot and a plane as requested. He had no idea there'd be a double cross.
He offers to make it up to him. Billingsley says he can give Malavasi a boat for free, but Malavasi says he can get his own stinking boat.
He declines with all the manners and grace we've come to expect from him. He growls as he gets back in the truck, and he drives off.
Billingsley tells them to drive safely, and y'all come back now, you hear?
Alone with Punjab, Billingsley is planning to get his share of the money for real now. And he figures his share is all of it. And he and Punjab leave.
So that evening, we see that Lynn is home and enjoying a bubble bath and smoking a joint.
But the relaxation ends when she hears someone enter the apartment. She grabs a gun, but after a few tense seconds, we see who it is. It's Billingsley. She drops the gun when she sees him, but she's not happy to see him. She's grimacing.
Billingsley walks in and makes himself at home. He sits down on the toilet and takes off his boots. Says his feet are killing him, and he's been on them all day.
He's eyeing her in the tub. He asks to have some hot water to bathe in, so she grabs a towel and gets out of the tub, though we can't see anything due to her panties, which are made of bubbles. She tells him that he can have the tub all to himself now. He tries to grab her, but she threatens to be the slicer to his ham hands. He asks if he can at least have some of that smoke, and she gives him a hit off her joint. And then Lynn slips into something more covering.
Lynn robes up, and Billingsley tells her the whole story so far. Billingsley says he's there to make her rich. He says that Joe and Ling are the keys to a fortune, and he fills her in on the Malavasi double cross and says that Malavasi has all the cash and that Morales is the competition. Lynn notes that Morales did leave in a hurry.
Billingsley says that Malavasi is on the island looking for a boat, but they can find him first with help from Joe and Ling. Lynn tells him that the women are due to be executed in the morning, so Billingsley says, let's break them out tonight.
Now we're back in Matron Ortega's office. This time it's General Balthazar paying a visit. He asks about the prisoners, and she says that's kinky.
Yeah, it's a 3-on-1, might be too kinky, even for him. He's removing his shirt, and we see that he has medals pinned to the breast of his undershirt. And then he surprises Matron Ortega with a little finger action, if you know what I mean.
She feigns surprise, and then says she's shocked.
But she's into it. And then he pulls her onto him. At the base, Lynn demands rudely to be let into the holding cell. The duty officer there asks for a reason, and she barks that it's none of her fucking business.
Back in Matron Ortega's office, the scene has reached its climax. The general says he wishes to see the prisoners, And Matron Ortega says that she'll send for them, but the general says no, they'll go to them.
He wants to see them through the bars of their cage. He says he's a master of camouflage. Lynn walks into the cell. There's another duty sergeant sitting there. She's trying to eat her dinner, and Jackson throws it on the ground. She probably doesn't have a lot of fans amongst her co-workers.
Armed with a gun, asks for the keys to the cell. She gets them and opens the cell holding Joe and Maylene and explains that this is a bust-out. She tosses a pair of handcuffs to Joe and tells her to fake it till they make it in the clear.
Joe locks the guard in the cage, and they grab some guns. Joe asks Lynn about her sense of integrity, and Lynn says she doesn't need it now. She just resigned.
General Balthazar and Matron Ortega are stopped by a soldier with a question about the duty roster. Ortega says this won't take a minute, looks over the paper and hands it back. Then the soldier gets into a Jeep and drives off.
Question answered. Then the general and the matron arrive just as Lynn is walking out with Joe and Mei Ling. They're pretty shocked to see that. And General Balthazar yells, "Arrest them!" And now the sisters spring into action.
Joe and Mei Ling produce guns and things get ugly quickly. And the escape becomes a shootout.
And amongst the casualties are Matron Ortega and the general.
Explosions and gunfire echo throughout the camp.
Billingsley and Punjab drive past a guard tower with a lit stick of dynamite, which they toss, and the tower explodes, ejecting the guard. And then WP and Punjab crash through the gate of the prison. WB is shooting as Punjab drives.
Joe, Mei Ling, and Lynn round a corner where Billingsley is waiting with their getaway car. Two ladies call for a cab, he quips, and they all drive off and have successfully escaped.
The next day, they are relaxing out in the sun. I guess they're at Billingsley's place. And Billingsley is jogging around in his underwear. Lynn, Joe, and Mei Ling are discussing the three-way money split. They're all prettied up for this scene. Mei Ling says that Lynn's cut is a nice nest egg for a retired servicewoman, but small potatoes for a revolution. Lynn doesn't care about that, but then Joe offers to give Mei Ling her share. $250,000 wouldn't do much for her in the U.S. other than making the IRS happy. She's got rich parents. Mei Ling is touched by this, but Joe cautions them all about Billingsley, who looks ridiculous, running around in the background behind them. Lynn tried to defend Billingsley based on their former relationship. She says that he put his life on the line to bust them out.
Joe notes that Billingsley told them that Malavasi tried to get a plane, but the deal went bad, and that now he's looking for a boat. But the only way he could know all this is if he was right there at the time. So they realize that Billingsley can't be trusted. So Joe suggests they give him a test to check his integrity.
He'll either prove himself honest or he'll get the best screwing of his cheating life. It's kind of a win-win for Billingsley there.
Now we see the same scene 3 times over with subtle differences.
First, it's Joe.
Billingsley is doing push-ups in blue shorts.
Not shorts. These are underpants. Very small, very tight underpants.
Joe comes in to thank him for busting her out and saving her life. He checks the window to see if the coast is clear. A short time later, Billingsley is doing sit-ups as Joe is getting dressed. She asks if he meant what he said, and he confirms that it's just the 3 of them. Her, him, and the money. Nobody else.
Next, Lynn goes in for the same treatment, and now Billingsley is wearing leopard print panties. But again, it's the same seduction, aftermath, and false promise. It's just the 3 of us, you, me, and the money.
Next, we see Billingsley doing push-ups in, I'm not calling them panties.
They look like panties.
What do you call those? Briefs.
Man panties.
They're briefs.
They're man panties.
Next, we see Billingsley doing push-ups in red briefs. Mei Ling comes in and says that since they're going to be working together, they should get to know one another better. He checks the window to see if the coast is clear. A short time later, Billingsley is doing sit-ups as Mei Ling is getting dressed. She asks if he meant what she said, and he confirms that it's just the 3 of them. Her, him, and the money. Nobody else.
The next morning, Billingsley is feeling pretty good.
He's reinvigorated,
Punjab is packing the Jeep as the women wait outside. Billingsley says that all we have to do is bop on down to the waterfront, grab Malavasi, and take the money. And the sisters agree, but they pull their guns on Billingsley and Punjab and say that they're going to do just that without him. They thank him for last night and say that's why they're not going to burn his ass.
So they tie Punjab and Billingsley to a tree.
Billingsley tried to say it was just a prank, but they obviously didn't believe him. He's incensed, and the sisters tease him a little bit.
Joe says he looks good all tied up like that. And Billingsley replies, "Oh yeah? There was a time I let you pee in my face just to see where it came from, but hell, not anymore." That's telling him, WP.
Then he says they can't leave him there like that, helpless. And Joe says, "You? Helpless? Come on." And as they drive off, Billingsley calls them bitches.
Now we cut away to see that, thanks to information provided by a citizen, Captain Morales and his men have found the plane where Malavasi had nearly made his escape from the island.
Morales is surveying the carnage, and that same citizen told Morales that Malavasi is looking for a boat. Ruiz photographs Morales in front of the plane as he talks about his impending promotion, and Ruiz's. He gives the citizen informant his reward. It's an 8x10 glossy of Morales.
Now we find ourselves in a warehouse at the waterfront. Somehow, Billingsley has escaped, and he's trying to charter a boat. The one he had in mind is owned by Pegleg, but Vic, the guy he's talking to, tells him that it's already been booked by a guy with one eye, and that they're scheduled to set off at 3 o'clock.
So Billingsley is wasting his time here. Billingsley agrees and says that he'll get his own boat. And then he calls on a wall-mounted rotary dial phone Captain Morales and says that he'll help him get the $1 million if he gets a 25% cut. Morales apparently agrees, so Billingsley tells him to meet him on the pier at 3 p.m. Now we see a town scene. A woman is putting trash in a can with a pair of legs sticking out of it. Maybe they're a mannequin. Maybe it's a person. I don't know. And then our savage sisters exit a building. They're dressed to the nines, but they look kind of skanky. We see the woman who was putting trash in is now removing the shoes.
Inside Pegleg's keg, the bouncer recognizes Lynn right away. Lynn asks Victor, the bouncer, who she knows from her whoring days, if he's seen Malavasi.
Victor wonders why, and Lynn says that Malavasi gave her a dose of an STD, and she's here to collect for the doctor bill. Victor wants to purchase some alone time with Lynn, but she says she's still out of commission, so she offers Joe and Ling in her place.
Victor is a generous guy, so he tells his friends that if they would like to take Joe and Ling to the back, it's on him. And then Victor says that as a consolation prize, Lynn can dance for him. After all, she's one of the best strippers in town.
She's the best at everything. And thus we begin a long and frustrating striptease in which Lynn barely reveals anything. Yes, the emphasis in this striptease is on the tease.
In the back, Ling and Joe quickly dispose of their dates and start going room to room looking for Malavasi. Joe opens one door, interrupting a surprised couple. After an awkward silence, she says, "If you're going to start without me, forget it."
We get a brief shot of Lynn, still mostly dressed with a shirt that must be stuck on with double-stick tape.
Joe and Ling duck from the hallway as One Eye and two more of Malavasi's men walk through.
As having concluded their business, they go into the main part of the club and molest a waitress as they watch the slowly progressing striptease. One of the men says that they should go, and so they go. Then Morales and his men come in. Joe screeches that they have to get out of there, and they manage to fight their way out successfully. Morales goes down, but luckily Ruiz is there to document with a photograph.
A boy tugs on One Eye's shirt, asking for money. One Eye picks the boy up, places him down right in front of him, pats him on the head, and kicks him square in the chest. And then he goes up to get Malavasi.
What a guy. Now Malavasi's in a room with several whores. I guess he's engaged all of them. But they're not going to let him do what he wanted to do. One Eye enters the room to tell Malavasi that they have the boat. So Malavasi rolls off his whore and starts to get dressed.
He tells the women to line up for their presents, and then he shoots them.
Unfortunately, they didn't line in a straight line, so it took several bullets.
When Malavasi comes outside, One Eye notes that it took more than one bullet this time, and Malavasi complains that they wouldn't stand still.
The stinking bitches wouldn't stand still. And the kid One Eye kicked is still there, but keeping his distance.
So now Malavasi and the banditos are at the dock where Pegleg's boat is being readied.
Malavasi's bad mood continues when he learns that Pegleg is only on his way, because they're sitting ducks out there. Malavasi demands that one of the sailors start the boat up without Pegleg. But it's not necessary, because just then, Pegleg wheels up, and whatever you expected Pegleg to be, he's twice that.
Yeah, Pegleg is in a wheelchair, and he has two peg legs. Malavasi says, "I don't believe it," and Pegleg says, "You better believe it if you want to get off this island."
He wants to see the color of their cabbage before things proceed any further, but just then an extra waddles into the frame crying out, "Stinking army bastards!"
Then there is much shooting,
because Morales and his men are there. Malavasi's men fight back and Pegleg wheels away quickly. Pegleg is also firing on the army, shooting from behind some barrels of some liquid.
The army blows up the dock, the aftermath of which shows us Pegleg's wheelchair hitting the ground piece by piece, and this is quickly followed by one of Pegleg's peg legs.
Our savage sisters are observing the shootout from a safe distance.
At the Jeep, the sisters are anxious to enter the fray, but Ling says that they really should wait for an opening.
It's really not looking good for Morales now. He yells at his men to cover the back of the building, but instead they drive through the building. Now the women decide that this is the opening they need, and they drive into the melee.
As they round a corner, they pass by Billingsley and Punjab, waiting in their car. Billingsley is striking a deal with Malavasi. Half or nothing, and he'll get him to a boat and safely off the island. Malavasi tells him, "You got a stinking deal," and he and One Eye get into the car, and they speed off. Captain Morales finds himself in the sisters' path, but they can't slow down for him. After all, this ain't no crosswalk, and they mow him down. As the sisters speed off, Ruiz runs to his fallen captain, who has been embedded into the dirt with tire treads across his chest. Ruiz laments the promotions that will never be, and Morales instructs him to take one last picture, while they still have light.
Yes, and because it's such a clever homage to the Roadrunner cartoons.
So the sisters drive off in pursuit of Billingsley and Malavasi.
They turn down a dirt road, and Billingsley jumps in front of them. He says Malavasi reneged on their deal, stole his car, and killed Punjab. Exhibit A is Punjab's head with a knife stuck into it as he's lying across a fence. But he knows where Malavasi is headed, to the boat they hired for him. So he offers the women their cuts of the money if they drive him there.
So they either feel sorry for him or need his information and tell him to get into their car.
Billingsley asks if they're going to double-cross him again, and Joe says, perish the thought. Now One Eye and Malavasi have gotten to the shore and found that despite their misgivings, the boat is there.
The Savage Sisters and Billingsley reach a fork in the road, and Billingsley tells them to go left. Both roads lead to the beach, but the left route is the one that leads to the boat.
Malavasi and One Eye have reached the beach. There's an outrigger coming from the boat to them. As the boat gets closer to shore, we see, and they see, that it's our Savage Sisters and Billingsley on the boat.
Lynn says, hold it, chump. Malavasi and One Eye turn to run, but machine gun fire stops them in their tracks. Malavasi turns and says, we've been looking all over for you to give you your share of the money.
Haha. Sure you have. The women make him step away from the money and to the edge of the beach. Joe throws them 2 shovels and tells them to start digging straight down. Malavasi falls to his knees and says again that he was just trying to find them and give them their money. He says they put a gun to his back and forced him, but she's not moved and she just says, dig.
Joe tells Malavasi that he killed the man she loved and her friends, and she wants him to be thinking about that for his last living moments.
And we see them buried up to their necks in the sand.
And Billingsley says that the only thing left is for them to split the money. That sentence never goes well.
Well, the women do agree, except for the part where Billingsley gets any of it. And then Malavasi has an I told you so moment, but Billingsley has more pressing concerns.
Billingsley has a gun and tells the Savage Sisters not to come any closer. He says he's never hurt a woman, but he's not opposed to it either.
They're not scared, though. When he tells them not to take another step closer, Lynn says, is that a big step? And she takes a big step towards him. And Joe says, or a baby step. And she takes a tiny step towards him. Billingsley fired, but he's got no bullets. They emptied his clip.
These Savage Sisters ain't no dummies. The tide is coming in, and Malavasi and One Eye's exposed heads from the ground aren't happy about it.
They start beating up Billingsley as Malavasi calls for help. Someone off screen is throwing buckets of water at them. Later on, we'll see his hat floating in the surf. Now the money's being divided. Each woman gets $333,000.
That's $2,318,658.21 in today's money.
That's a lot. And the last $10,000 goes to Billingsley.
$70,262.37.
Lynn tells him to buy a new shirt and a fresh start. Joe gives all her money to Mei Ling, as she promised. Billingsley can't believe it, but Joe says she got what she wanted. Malavasi's gone.
Billingsley asks Lynn if she's giving away her share too, but Lynn says that she hasn't got what she wants yet. And so Joe and Lynn head to the outrigger. They toss Billingsley his car keys.
Mei Ling waves goodbye. Billingsley turns to Mei Ling. He offers her a ride and then applies the full court press to rekindle their relationship and, of course, get some of the money. She looks unmoved as she walks away. The end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Savage Sisters from 1974.
Savage Sisters had an estimated budget of $250,000. The movie was filmed on location in Manila, the Philippines, one of many action films shot there on the cheap during the 1970s, around the time that Ferdinand Marcos placed the entire country under martial law. Filming was scheduled to begin on February 15, 1974, according to The Hollywood Reporter and Daily Variety.
In April of 74, The Hollywood Reporter published an article saying that Ebony, Ivory, and Jade, the film's working title, was in post-production, and said the movie was the first release in a co-production deal between producer-actor John Ashley and American International Pictures, AIP, who retained the right of first refusal on all Ashley productions for the next 5 years.
Ashley, who owned 15 movie theaters in Oklahoma, had previously produced 10 films in the Philippines, including Black Mama, White Mama, which was also co-produced and directed by Eddie Romero and released by American International Pictures.
The film star, Gloria Hendry, who played Lynn, later recalled, John Ashley was a lot of fun, a very positive individual with a lot of energy, a free spirit. It was the first time I had ever gone to Manila, to the Philippines, to work. I spent 3 wonderful months there. I learned a lot about the country and their process of doing films.
John Ashley said in an interview that there had been a lot of martial arts fight scenes in the movie. However, by the time the film was released, several martial arts films had not performed well, so the advertising campaign focused instead on the movie being about a Patty Hearst-type liberation army. The whole campaign for Savage Sisters was designed around that aspect of history, he said.
John Ashley received an award from the Filipino Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for his constant support of the Filipino movie industry. The awards celebrated his employment of Filipino actors and crew members, as well as opening up the market for Filipino movies in the States. It was presented to him by none other than Imelda Marcos.
Savage Sisters was released in July of 1974. The scheduled opening date was July 17th, but the earliest release date confirmed by published reviews was August 28, 1974, when the movie played at the Archeo 86th Street Twin One Theater in New York City. The first time the movie appeared on the top 50 films by box office gross was the week of August 29th through September 4th. During the movie's initial run, it peaked at number 6 the week of September 26th.
A press book issued by AIP for theater owners provided a few blurbs on the cast and the production. One of my favorites of these small stories is headlined, "Sid Haig is 6 feet 4 inches," and says in the film that he is attired in filthy flamboyance, topped by a grandiose sombrero and crossed ammo belts over his chest. The same press book captioned a picture of John Ashley taken from the film as handsome.
Savage Sisters opened in LA on October 2nd, 1974.
Taglines for the film include, "Meet the Savage Sisters, 3 of the world's deadliest women.
Alone, they were pretty. Together, they were pretty damn mean.
Beware, they are still at large. The Brigadier General, Ling, an activist in both politics and love. The Colonel, Lynn, the playgirl of the Liberation Army. The Field Marshal, Joe, who passed up a fortune for a gun." I don't think any of those applied in the movie, actually.
The press book we mentioned earlier also recommended theater owners stage lookalike contests for the 3 female leads in the show, and a $1 million contest to be conducted with local radio stations, not to give away $1 million, but to ask people what they do with $1 million.
They also recommend doing a tie-in promotion with a local haberdasher due to the fact that John Ashley plays a, quote, sharp-looking dressed man, immaculate in white linen tropical suit with a dazzling print shirt open at the neck and a white Panama nesting atop his head at a cocky angle, end quote. They also suggested hiring 3 models to walk through shopping plazas holding signs advertising the premiere, but as they suggested hiring a black, a white, and an oriental, the less said about that idea, the better.
The Chicago Tribune said that only the broadly comic performance of Sid Haig breaks the monotony of it all.
And the Los Angeles Times called it one of the better lurid potboilers to come out of the Philippines. Romero's direction is snappy, amusing, as a sort of very broad live-action cartoon.
Diabolique magazine wrote that Ashley was especially fun in the film, as a mustachioed, cigar-smoking con-man type figure, doing push-ups in leopard print underwear, and betting the 3 leads, indicating Ashley might have enjoyed a decent career as a character actor in later years had he so chosen.
Box Office magazine commented that in Savage Sisters, there are 1 or 2 new twists despite all the violence. Much of the film is done tongue-in-cheek. Also, all of the nude scenes have been cut. Only some shots of Vic Díaz's ample posterior bulging out of his pants, and a mild striptease by Gloria Hendry remain. The review also complains that Romero and Ashley have allowed Sid Haig and Díaz to overact mercilessly, and some of it comes off as pure low comedy.
Actors in Savage Sisters that have appeared in other American International Pictures films include Gloria Hendry, who played Lynn Jackson, who had previously appeared in Black Caesar, Slaughter's Big Ripoff, and Hell Up in Harlem, all in 1973.
And of course, we've seen John Ashley before he played W.P. Billingsley. He was in Drag Strip Girl and Motorcycle Gang in 1957, Suicide Battalion, How to Make a Monster and Hot Rod Gang, 1958. In 1963, he was one of the Beach Party Gang, and he returned in 1964 for Muscle Beach Party and Bikini Beach. And in 1965, he was in Beach Blanket Bingo and How to Stuff a Wild Bikini. He also appeared in Sergeant Deadhead in 1965. And lastly, Attack of the Eye Creatures in 1967 for American International Television.
Sid Haig, who played Malavasi, had previously appeared in Bloodbath in 1966, It's a Bikini World in 1967, which was released by Trans-American Pictures, Black Mama, White Mama, and Coffee, both in 1973, and would go on to appear in Foxy Brown later in 1974, and lastly in Underground Aces, which came out in 1981, but was the last film released by Filmways that had been developed under American International Pictures.
And Leopoldo Salcedo, who was General Balthazar, appeared in Lost Battalion in 1960.
In addition to those movies, other films that were shot in the Philippines reused the same stable of actors. Among those are Black Mama, White Mama from 1973, which was also directed by Eddie Romero, and featured appearances by Sid Haig, Eddie Garcia, who played Captain Morales, Vic Díaz, who was One Eye, Dindo Fernando, who was Ernesto, Alfonso Carvajal, who was Ruiz, and Subas Herrero, who played Victor.
Bamboo Gods and Iron Men from 1974 featured Eddie Garcia, who was Captain Morales in this movie, Vic Díaz again, Roberto Rivera, who played Rocco, and Subas Herrero, who played Victor.
And also from director Eddie Romero, Mad Doctor of Blood Island, which was distributed as part of AITV's Edgar Allan Poe Fantasy and Terror package exclusively in Canada in 1974, featured John Ashley, Alfonso Carvajal, Bruno Panzalan, who played Smiling Jake, Johnny Long, who played Jackal, and also appearing in the cast of this movie is Zenon Gonzalez, who had worked as unit production manager on Savage Sisters.
Well, Jeff, we've found out what everyone else thinks about this movie. Now it's time to talk about our thoughts. Using our scale of AIP, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic, how do you rate Savage Sisters and why?
Coming out at the tail end of what might be considered the classic run of these films that were shot in the Philippines, I'm of course regarding this in relation to the earlier films released by Roger Corman's New World Pictures, which are arguably the best in the genre. Savage Sister plays as kind of an exercise in what have we learned. I can't say it takes things to the extreme. In fact, it does just the opposite of that. The film repeatedly takes us to the edge of perversity without ever crossing the line. The closest probably being the more sexual scenes involving Matron Ortega. These are the only scenes that do little more than imply what is going on, though still leaving much to the imagination. The other similar scenes would be the obligatory shower scene, Lynn's bubble bath with the strategically placed bubbles, the triple seduction of John Ashley by the three Savage Sisters, and Lynn's striptease, with the emphasis on the tease and nearly eliminating the strip altogether. And while a lot of the Corman-produced films tend to get a little rapey, the closest we come in Savage Sisters involves a power drill. It had the potential of being so much worse than anything that it may have come before, but the operation is aborted by the arrival of General Balthazar. And these scenes, which bring us just to the brink of what we expect to see from these films, never delivered the expected. And that makes the film, whether or not that was the intention, play like a parody. And throw in the character of Malavasi, whom Sid Haig plays as broadly as possible, shouting his lines with utmost glee while stretching his face into every expression he can muster, in a scene like the demise of Captain Morales, who ends up embedded into the road with the tire treads running across him like something out of a Warner Brothers cartoon. I really wouldn't have been surprised if he had stuck his thumb in his mouth and started blowing to reinflate himself and joined back in on the chase for the $1 million. And speaking of Sid Haig, he really makes this movie. I was looking forward to his sporadic appearances in the film, and teaming up with Vic Díaz, who anyone familiar with the genre would recognize, was also fun. Even though Malavasi does the most horrible things, killing people for no apparent reason with no remorse, one gets the feeling that Sid Haig is having so much fun playing such a despicable character that the audience is more than willing to go on that ride. It really made me miss Sid Haig, who was a regular on the convention circuit the last few years of his life. It would have been interesting to hear from him directly what he thought of Savage Sisters. Now, I haven't yet said anything about Gloria Hendry, Cheri Caffaro, Rosanna Ortiz, and John Ashley's performances. The women are fine, but sadly their characters are never really developed. We learn just a bit of their past, but they know how to fight, and that's what's really important in a film like this. John Ashley, on the other hand, as a ladies' man hustler, we know right away he's a ladies' man because when we are first introduced to him, he has a harem. Still, he does manage to steal every scene he's in, provided he's not sharing the scene with Sid Haig. All in all, I found Savage Sisters to be a really enjoyable film, and it gets an A for awesome from me. What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
Savage Sisters has no business being as fun as it is. It's easy to tag it as sleazy, sexist, racist, exploitative, and cheap, because all those things are true. But that's also reductive, leaving out the one thing that this movie has that works to override all of that. That thing is fun. This movie is fun to watch. It looks like it was fun to shoot. I think the writer, director, actors all wanted to take the subject matter and make it more lighthearted. This is a film that doesn't take itself too seriously, but yet it's still a real movie. The plot holds together without too many holes, and we should know we tried to find all of them. And it's a decent, if low-budget, production. And to be honest, even though Sid Haig, Vic Díaz, and John Ashley really ham it up in this movie, as you said and we've said before, I don't think it would be the same film if they played it straight. Sid Haig as Malavasi is a despicable character. He does horrible things, and we should rightly hate him. But I think there's something really satisfying in watching him have a no good, very bad, horrible day, full of transportation problems and victims who waste his bullets by not standing still. He gets more and more frustrated before he finally ends up drowning in the surf, still complaining all the while. And I had a really good time watching that. John Ashley's character is also loathsome. He's a turncoat, and that coat is ugly, loud, and too tight. He's smarmy and untrustworthy. He's a creep who deserves every bad turn his life takes after trying to swindle the Savage Sisters. And yet his character becomes the focus of every scene he's in, just like you said. And it's not just because of his ghastly wardrobe. I felt like I had to watch him to see what he was going to do next. Maybe it would be slimy, maybe it would be stupid, but It was going to be funny, and I wanted to see it. Vic Díaz as One Eye and Eddie Garcia as Captain Morales were also great in their roles, adding a bit of levity to a film that could have been played deadly serious. And this is a movie with 3 strong women, outsmarting the men trying to get the better of them. They can also fight physically, but I really enjoyed the scenes of them outthinking the competition more than those of them karate chopping and shooting soldiers in a bar brawl. The women seemed to be having fun with their roles, as did the horny prison matron. That sense of fun elevated the film. And while I'd never claim that this is a great movie, it's not going to win an Oscar, it still gets an A for awesome rating from me because this movie was really enjoyable to watch, even multiple times as we do for this podcast. I know I said a lot of the same things you did, but there's really only one conclusion to be drawn from this. It's a fun movie. It's a good time. I recommend it, and you do too. And with that, I think that's the end of this edition of the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.